Welcome back from Delta Y. This week we'll be talking about Virgin Galactic's VSS Unity second spaceflight and
new research from the University of Bern on learning new vocabulary from another language while you sleep. I'm Grayson.
This is Josh, and welcome to Delta Y. So our first article for this week is on Virgin Galactic's new spaceflight that they conducted on February 22nd. This was their first time conducting a spaceflight with a passenger on board. Previously, they've only done 2 pilots, but this time, astronaut trainer Beth Moses tagged along. So this spaceflight reached 3 times the speed of sound, which is a new high top speed for Virgin Galactic, and reached a new maximum altitude of 55.85 miles, which is the highest that their vehicle has ever gone. Now, I will say that's really impressive considering they launched from 45,000 feet. So they're launching, up high where there's a little bit thinner of an atmosphere, because all they're doing is their launch vehicle simply drops the rocket off and it looks kind of like a shuttle, and they ignite the rocket engine on that kind of shuttle and it launches upward. So this was their second time launching this, and it worked beautifully. They had no incidents. Yeah. And they tested it with a full complement of weight to simulate a full crew of passengers, along with some sensors that NASA had them, tag along with them.
Yeah, it's interesting because, like you said, it's from a different elevation. Normally, you would have thought that it would do it like over at Cape Canaveral in Florida. But they're doing it in Mojave, California, which is it's an interesting, I guess, decision in terms of how they're launching the spacecraft.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, it's really just because they need the Mojave Desert because of its emptiness.
Yeah.
So they launch up, with their plane, and their plane is, I believe, the biggest wingspan of a plane ever conducted. I've seen pictures of it. I don't think I've ever seen it flying, but it's incredible because it's got 2 fuselages, if I remember correctly.
And this is the launching craft, not the landing craft in terms of the the landing craft, I'm pretty sure, extends its wings, right?
Yep, it folds them out kind of like a fighter jet. So what this is it's 2 fuselages and 1 really long wing over the whole thing, and in the middle between the 2 fuselages, this spacecraft sits and it's held up. So yeah, this was a very successful test.
I think the way you're describing it almost kind of reminds me of that bit from The Incredibles, that the little spacecraft that they had that carried the ball of that.
Oh yeah,
like the Omnidroid or whatever.
Yep. So this is a little bit. So this is not like that kind of. I shouldn't say it was. So it's 2. Think of like 2 747s duct tape their wings together. That's the simplest way I can describe it. So if you have a wing on each side like normal. Then you have a fuselage, 2 of them. And then between those fuselages is empty space with a wing.
Interesting.
And so in between those 2 is where the plane sits. If I remember correctly. Because this was news last year when they successfully flew that plane. It might have been 2 years ago. I don't remember how long ago it was that they successfully flew their launch vehicle.
Interesting. So this is the 5th powered flight test for the VSS Unity, and Virgin Galactic hopes to continue these flights throughout this year. I don't know if it says how many more they're actually planning on doing. I hope it's at least a couple more, probably with more profound improvements in terms of crew size or passenger size, or even just how they're launching it, even to be more efficient. Well,
the founder, Richard Branson, is actually hoping to fly in it by the time of the Apollo 11 anniversary in July.
Dang.
So they did purchase land in New Mexico for Spaceport America. I believe it's called. Yep, Spaceport America, which is where they'll fly out of in the future. Because the Mojave is used for a lot of different things in terms of military.
Oh, yeah. But didn't they use that section of, that sort of deserty area for... I don't know if that's actually what I'm thinking of, but didn't they use that for Project Manhattan?
No, they didn't use that. They used spots outside of Vegas for Manhattan.
Okay.
The Mojave is where... You watch Mythbusters, right?
Yeah.
That's where the Mythbusters tested all their explosions and stuff.
Okay.
Was in the Mojave, because there's nothing there.
Okay, because I just remember Mojave being somewhere like California, New Mexico... Not California, New Mexico, but California... Nevada.
Yeah.
The other state that starts with N.
Yeah. So they're moving from, California over to New Mexico, less populated, less risk of disaster, things like that. They don't have the risk of going down over a major city as much. I mean, yes, there are cities in New Mexico, but it's a lot of empty space.
Yeah.
So this was just really cool to see that, they successfully launched with a passenger. So what they're gearing up to do is to launch with a full load of passengers without any issues, really. So, I mean, that's a really cool goal to me. I mean, SpaceX has the... I'm just going to keep calling it the BFR.
Yeah.
It's the space... What is it called now? Starlight?
I think it's just Starship.
Starship.
I think it's just Starship.
So they have their full, stainless steel Starship that I don't know how many people they're actually advertising to fly.
See, I've read articles saying that thing should never be able to get to space, just with what it's being made out of.
Yeah, but we'll have to see. Obviously, that's in the future. But, I mean, the idea of just buying a ticket to just go and experience space a little bit is just really cool. And I hope that Virgin Galactic spurs other companies and other entrepreneurs to pursue this, because it would greatly reduce the cost to just experience space.
Well,
55 miles isn't all the way out there.
Well, I remember us talking about this earlier. I'm not sure if it was on the podcast or not, but with Elon Musk's whole SpaceX venture, if he, or not even SpaceX, with just going to Mars, $100,000 is still a pretty top ticket to pay for something like that. And
it's still a premium for the upper class, but it's still something that it's a trip of a lifetime. Honestly,
essentially, you're going to be going to Mars.
It is a two-way ticket. He is advertising it as a two-way ticket.
Okay,
it's a multiple-year trip, so it's the most expensive. Well, I shouldn't say that. It is one of the most expensive vacations you can take.
Although I wouldn't really call it a vacation, considering the fact that you're going to be I've read up on, or I've watched a couple of videos and read up on what we'd actually have to do for a Mars colony for something like that. Basically, bury it in Mars dirt, essentially, and have these be cramped spaces. I wouldn't really... honestly, I don't think I'd call that a vacation.
I wouldn't either. I wonder if they ever thought of, flying a tunnel boring machine to Mars.
Oh,
and
gosh.
just going down and, through.
Well,
and you could create, a 30-foot living space, in diameter.
No, see, because the problem with that is the atmosphere would be in there as well. We're looking to have an oxygen-rich atmosphere, and the only way to do that would be to actually construct our own, environment, our own... have a colony already pre-built, or just have minimal manufacturing.
We'd have to have a biodome almost.
Oh, well, not even a biodome, but more some of the videos that I've watched have described getting these capsules and these tubes that would connect the capsules together, and then have rope. Basically, we would never be able to go outside onto Mars due to the UV radiation. Mm-hmm. But we'd be able to either pilot robots that would do so, or be able to get into exosuits that would attach to part of the base, because there's a lot of dust. Basically, they call it microdust almost on Mars, that if we track that in, could cause pulmonary problems for us. So we can never really set foot until we actually terraform the planet.
That's why you always see space suit designs for Mars, and NASA's rovers they've been testing, where you turn on the rover and you just walk into your spacesuit. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of going to be the standard, I think. Yeah,
that's going to be very interesting to see, especially with Virgin Galactic. I don't know if they're specifically looking...
They're more of a tourism aspect. So right now they're shooting for the low-hanging fruit. They're shooting to get people into space, to experience the weightlessness, to experience the views you get, because you do see, the curvature of the Earth. You do get that...
take that, flat earthers.
You do get that, that look of the world. So it's really just an experience to see and kind of experience, a lower gravity to, kind of get just a new venture on life.
Yeah, no, that'd be definitely that I can see benefits for it being in tourism, but I don't really know what else besides going to another planet, building this basically what is essentially rocket ship tourism would be.
Yeah, I'm not sure where, it's Richard Branson, he's just using money he has to fund this, right? So I'm not sure what the end goals are for Virgin Galactic. Right now I see that they're purely tourism. But I'm curious to see, what will they expand that to in the future? Mm-hmm. Could this be used to launch payloads? If you design the rocket to go higher, could you shoot for space stations?
I'm still waiting for the point where we actually get a space elevator.
Yeah. That's so far off still due to material engineering, but
darn.
I know, I'm still excited for it. But, anyway, let's just keep in mind we should be, focusing on the events that are happening currently. This Virgin Galactic flight was a big moment for them. It's really impressive. It was their first, Beth Moses is their first female flyer, which is, interesting to see that. I'm very happy to see more women in space industry than like most things you think about. I mean, the amount of female astronauts is...
Or just even astrologers or anything having to do with space is...
Yeah. It's really great to see that.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's awesome.
So anyway, I think we should move on to our next article, which is on...
So it's going to be on learning new vocabulary during deep sleep. This comes to us from the University of Bern. And again, all the articles that we have mentioned are going to be in the description of the video. So researchers have showed that we can acquire the vocabulary of a new language during distinct phases of slow wave sleep that have sleep learned memory could be retrievable unconsciously following waking. So basically what this means is while we're sleeping, if I think certain aspects or certain way, if there's a way we could teach language while we're sleeping and we could learn this kind of drew me back when I first read this. This kind of drew me back to when I was reading Brave New World by Aldous Huxley, where there's a concept in there called hypnopedia. Basically, it was just, I forget the character. It was like a little Serbian boy discovered this idea that he could recite an entire radio play in English when he heard it in his sleep, and it kind of generated this whole idea on subconscious morality in Aldous Huxley's case for the Brave New World. But it's largely been discussed as more of a pseudoscience, but this I think is starting to prove that it's wrong because there's actually a specific technique to it.
Yeah, so I was just reading through the article a little bit, and really the brain goes through periods of active states, so up states and down states, where it's active and, thinking during your sleep. And then there's points where it's in a down state, where it's not as active. Mm-hmm. And so what they're shooting for is during the active states, which they're saying last for seconds at times, mm-hmm. where they can put information into your brain somehow during the active state, and when you hit the deactive state, they stop pulsing information. So it's kind of like a wave. So every time you hit your peak, they're going to be putting information. Mm-hmm. So their goal there is to kind of push information through in a cycle so that you're not learning the entire time you're sleeping, but you're learning when your brain is focused on being a brain and not just focusing on sleeping.
Yeah, so these stages, these peaks of down cycles and up cycles, or the down and up stages that you were describing, are a part of deep sleep. So there's, technically speaking, two different stages. Okay, so there's 5 stages of sleep, 2 that we can actually divide them into between REM, which is rapid eye movement, that's when you dream, and non-REM, or deep sleep. The deeper we go, the more, I guess, there's a lot of medical benefits to having deeper sleep, but this learning takes place during deep sleep, where there's not, oddly enough, when I learned this in psychology, it was taught to me that there wasn't a lot of brain activity because the brain actually does a lot more chemical changes, sort of repairs itself kind of from any kind of neurotransmitters that are hanging around in the area or whatnot.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, yeah, they are saying that the 2 states, the up state and the down state, cycle about every half second. So you'd have to pulse your information, perfectly time it with the brain's up and down states to mm-hmm. actually teach somebody anything. And in this case, a language is what they were testing.
Yeah. So I actually find that kind of interesting, because how they could pulse that in such a way, because it takes at least a second to articulate pretty much any kind of language from any kind of word, or any word from any language. I'm
not even sure how they're doing it, and it's going to be interesting to see, what they're actually doing. Are they putting each little bit of a word in every half second? Mm-hmm. So you're forming a full word over the course of multiple cycles.
Well, and on top of that, since it's unconscious retrieval of the memory, it's going to be like you actually have to have a full phrase. You actually have to link that to something to make, because when you have an unconscious link to something, like when I made this connection to Aldous Huxley, I didn't know that that didn't come to my mind. I sort of had to think about it for a second. Mm-hmm. I don't really know. I'm not an expert on psychology by any means, but from what I remember of deeper, I guess, unconscious retrieval of memories, it requires it to have some sort of link to something that you already know. So these phrases, like let's say we're trying to learn Spanish, hola. If you're trying to learn that, you'd have to say hola and then hello, or have that sort of phrase repeat in a pattern to the point where you could actually understand that in these up states and down states. So that way you could actually retrieve that unconsciously.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, what he's talking about unconsciously is that memory formation you don't have to be conscious to form memories. That's what they're basing this off of, is that during deep sleep you are unconscious. So you can actually learn things while unconscious. Mm-hmm. It just takes a lot of effort to do so. Yeah. And it's very interesting to keep, if you keep reading through this, and we highly recommend you do, is the interesting ways that they're working on doing this. So, like, the way that they're looking at, translating foreign languages.
So, they tested German, I think. They tested German for this.
It was in Switzerland, so I'd imagine, that would be the first choice they had. Due to proximity.
Yeah, I guess.
So, I mean, yeah. And it's interesting because a lot of German words I can think of are very long. The German language likes to use really long, drawn-out words to describe complex thoughts.
Well, part of that is just because they can just chain words together. Mm-hmm. They can just, like whether they have it as an example, when a sleeping person hears the word pairs Topher equals key and Guga equals elephant, then after waking they were able to categorize with better than chance accuracy whether the sleep played foreign words denominated something large, Guga, or small, Topher. So I'm pretty sure I butchered the pronunciation on those, but
you did better than I would have.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, Dad knew a little bit of German.
Yeah. So that's very interesting that they're using. It's not exactly direct translation. It's concepts right now.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't know if we're going to get to the point soon where we're going to get through complex concepts. But right now, the simplest concept is what they're striving for, and they've achieved something here. Obviously, when they're getting, it could be definitely any sort of fluke, but I tend to think that I'm a positive person usually, so I'm tending to think that it's very interesting, that they're getting this through the person's head.
Yeah, it's kind of like, well, I mean, we could get to the point where there's a bunch of popular culture aspects that have used this sort of idea of sleep learning, like with what was it, an episode of Friends, guy used I forget who it was, Chandler borrows.
Chandler?
Yeah, I always mispronounce the guy's name. He borrows a smoking cessation audio cassette from Rachel, and the tape tells him that he's a strong, confident woman.
Oh, I remember that one.
Yeah, and he stops smoking, but he starts like acting more effeminate.
Oh, I remember that one. He started acting like Rachel. That was a great episode. I mean, I think that maybe one day we could get to that point where you listen to something and you learn something. Well, maybe not have yourself change because of it?
Well, no, because, I mean, with that, like you said, it has to be timed perfectly for that, and in order for that to happen, I'm assuming you'd have to wear, like, an EKG hat or an ECG hat to measure your brain waves to check for these up and down states.
Yeah, and it'd be calculating exactly, when is that peak going to hit, so when can I transmit data to the brain to hopefully have it absorbed. And I'm assuming that they're testing this, like, when they were testing with small and large objects, to differentiate the two using a foreign language, are they using, the same word over and over and over again? Mm-hmm. Like, how many times do they have to pulse it before the person learns it?
Yeah, that kind of draws back to, again, Aldous Huxley from what I've remembered. They just put one phrase on repeat over and over and over again. And they use, I kind of find this abhorrent, but they used it on suggestions about morality, because remember, with Aldous Huxley, they separated their society into, like, classes based on, I think it was, like, Greek letters. Epsilons were at the bottom, alphas were at the top, and each one of them was played a separate Hypnopedia tape to suggest where they were in society. That kind of perturbs me a bit, but the idea that we could go from this being science fiction and used from kind of more malevolent uses to a more educational and more positive use, and it's actually no longer, I mean, in my opinion, this kind of validates the idea that this can develop into something like a more useful technology than it just being simply pseudoscience. Yeah,
and I think that this definitely has a place in the world. Maybe not right now, but I could definitely see that, in the future, or even the near future, we are, in terms of, like, realistic, if we look at the world, we are in the future. but we still have much more future to progress through, obviously.
Yeah.
But, like, I can see this being a place for certain things. Like, say you wanted to learn something. You didn't have to go to school for it if it wasn't, like... I see that, yes, there are certain vital points at which schooling is one of the best ways.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe not certain styles of it, but the concept of classroom or just hands-on experience is better than teaching through sleep.
Well,
but there's things like language, which would be an amazing thing to teach through sleep.
Well, I think that also draws back to more of a cultural idea of how we use time, and because like we only have 24 hours in a day, and it's all contingent on how we use it that defines our life. If we're able to expand that and basically you learn new things, be active while we sleep, essentially, that could improve our productivity. This could improve pretty much everything, every facet of our life almost entirely.
Mm-hmm. I agree. And I mean, we just could do so many things if we were able to learn for just a couple more hours during a day that we would be spending in deep sleep, just doing pretty much nothing normally.
Yeah, no, that's... This seems like a very interesting idea that we could probably explore further. We'll definitely have to keep track of this and see where this is going. But, alright.
I think we should wrap it up for there today.
Alright, sounds good. Well, as always, the links for these articles will be in the description down below. And as always, I'm Grayson.
This is Josh, and thank you for listening to Delta Y. Please leave your suggestions down below for anything we could do better. Be sure to give us a like or something if you did enjoy this video. If you didn't, you can definitely give us a dislike. Tell us, what your thoughts were, how we could improve, and be sure to read those articles down below if you found them interesting. We'll leave them down there with our links to all of our social medias.
And as always, stay creative, and we will see you all next time.